Good evening, friends, and welcome to Admissions Live. This is your weekly web show for college admissions professionals, part of the Higher Ed Live network, where we're all about digital development and professional empowerment. Thank you for sticking tight. I'm launching a solo show tonight, so I'm doing this all on my own. I haven't had anyone to kind of prep with beforehand, so thanks for tuning in right on time. I'm going to bring you this solo show tonight because we're talking about a much anticipated, much talked about TeensTALK live panel from a few weeks ago at the Stamats Integrated Marketing Conference. And just for a little bit of a background, I joined my colleague Seth Odell in Chicago a few weeks ago to attend the Stamats conference and participate in it. And we had the ability to live stream two of the panels that happened during the conference. One was a parents panel and the other one was a teens panel. And they were both fantastic focus groups, and each session was between an hour, and the teens session was actually an hour and a half. So I'm going to break all of that info down for you, give you kind of the shortened version of what was talked about, and then also my own takeaways from it. So kind of next steps for things that you might want to think about implementing, what these teens were talking about, what their perceptions were of all sorts of different kinds of topics related to the admissions process, but kind of more so related to marketing efforts and some of the kind of recruitment techniques that we have. So I want to do that for you. I want to get right to the show, but of course we're not going to do that without giving huge thanks to the sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. And Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College, who believe it's all in the visit and have created web and mobile applications to help institutions measure and manage their most critical recruitment tool, the college visit. So visit welcometocollege.com to learn more, or tweet at welcometocollege about a demo. Admissions Live is sponsored by Zinch.com, the preferred destination by over 3 million students to research schools and scholarships and to showcase themselves as more than a test score. Over 1,000 colleges and universities around the world partner with Zinch to attract and enroll best fit students on the largest college search social network in the world. To learn more about Zinch, email outreach@zinch.com or tweet at socialadmission. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Integral. They're your destination for social media research in higher education. Check out their research website and find out more about their latest white paper, a class of 2016 community analysis, to learn how creating communities for incoming students can improve admissions yield. And last, Admissions Live is sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Webster University used Scavenger for orientation, and students loved it. It ran 3 days to get students involved in each of their events. So you can find out more about that on the Scavenger U blog. All right, so I am ready for this solo show. What we're talking about is the TeensTALK panel that was presented at the Stamats Integrated Marketing Conference in Chicago just a few weeks ago. We've got all of the content from the TeensTALK panel and from the Parents Talk panel on higheredlive.com. So to get the full session that was presented there, you can just head on over to the other part of our website and view the entire panel. But what I'm doing for you tonight is kind of a shortened version of that 90-minute panel. Hopefully you are tuning in to have a conversation with me, and we're going to be using the Admissions Live hashtag as always. So what this panel was, it's the third time they're doing this panel, I believe, and they brought in 16 college-bound students from the Chicago area. They had really candid and honest answers. They were told to speak the truth, that they weren't going to hurt any of our feelings, and they were presenting to a group of marketing and recruitment professionals. So the people attending this conference were very focused on the actual marketing efforts that were coming out of admissions offices. So we're not going to talk so much about counseling strategies and other things that we're doing day to day in the admissions world. It was about a 90-minute session, so we've got a lot to cover. And one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that this panel was a group of regional students. So these students were all from the Chicago area. Many of them had attended the same high school. Many of them are actually going on to similar colleges. This is a regional panel, and a lot of these students were going on to regional schools in the Midwest. There were a few that were going a little bit farther out, but just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through some of their own perceptions, that this isn't a sample of students from across the U.S. It's not a widely diverse group of students in terms of a lot of the things that they were looking at, but their answers are going to certainly ring true. Even though it's a regional group, it's going to ring true to most of us in what we're doing. So what I'm going to cover, I'm breaking down their panel presentation into 5 different areas that were discussed, and it's not going to go exactly along with the way it was presented at the panel. It's going to be presented the way I think it makes sense. And we're going to talk about college search, the application process, marketing, campus visits, and their decision-making process. So that's how I'm going to break it down for you. And I want to bring up a few slides in between so that you know what part we're covering. If you're watching this later in the archive and you want to skip back and forth to different sections, hopefully this will make it a little bit easier to visualize. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the first question that was asked was, when did you get serious about applying to college? Most of the students said it was their junior year, which we know is the most popular time for the college search to be going on. And I think partly colleges do kind of encourage that time to be involved in the search. Students are typically taking their first either practice standardized test, or if they're an early candidate for SAT or ACT, they might be taking their first test in their junior year, and of course that's when we are starting to hit them with mailings because we find out all sorts of information about them and how they might be a good fit for our institution, and both academically and by the interest that they indicate on those tests. So junior year, not a surprise, that's what most students said. Some did say that their sophomore year was when they started really looking at colleges, and we know that this is a trend also. So those early test takers are going to be influenced by our marketing materials. And then there's just those students that have a genuine interest earlier on in their high school career that they want to get out and they want to start doing campus visits. So we've seen that sophomore trend, and there were a few students that did start their search that early. 2 students said that they didn't start their search until their senior year. One because he just wasn't interested until the senior year and he realized, okay, I need to get with it. But the other student didn't start her search until the senior year because she was undecided. And her indecision in what kind of a major and what kind of institution she wanted to go to, I wouldn't say that it led to procrastinating in the college search, but she needed some time to kind of develop and understand what she wanted, and didn't want to kind of rush through that in the junior year. So this is going to be my first takeaway, which was that summer before the senior year and even through the fall of the senior year can be a really critical time for undecided students. If they're showing that they're undecided early in the search, they might need more of our help later on in the search. So for me, I'm going to start considering pushing some of that undecided student marketing material that we have out to students a little bit later. So, or maybe reinforcing that our campus is open to undecided students, that we have many options for a student that's undecided as they're leading up to that time to submit an application. If they didn't know already that there are undecided programs at your institution, then might be a really great time to bring that undecided student into the fold. So they might not be so concerned in their junior year, but it might be another good time to hit them with that information later in the summer or even into the fall as application deadlines are approaching. So that was my first takeaway, which was a really great comment from that student, not something that I would have ever considered. The second question that was asked was the kind of institution that the students were applying to. Most of these students were applying to a mix of both public and private four-year institutions. When they were asked about applications to community college, for this group of students, they really weren't considering the community college as an option. They thought that it is a great option for some students, specifically students that might not be able to afford a four-year college experience, but it wasn't something that they were aspiring to. And so this is probably something that a lot of community colleges are in tune with, but and challenges that community colleges are aware of, but for me, it was interesting as kind of a value proposition to explore, and maybe with a different group of students. So for the student that is looking at a two-year institution and four-year institutions as options, I think the kind of value proposition that you're displaying or giving off to those prospective students is going to come down to what does the four-year experience really mean? And this panel of students was asked that because they were, in their response, they said, well, I wanted a four-year college experience, but they couldn't exactly describe what that four-year college experience was. So kind of institution, for this group, mostly a mix of four-year public and private, really weren't looking at community colleges, also really weren't looking at for-profit colleges, which was also asked, and their main reason for that is because they didn't feel like the for-profit colleges were marketed towards them, that they thought that they were marketed more for that non-traditional returning or continuing education student, which makes sense to me. But if you're a for-profit that's tuning in and you are looking for that high school demographic, it's not coming across to them that way. Location, and a lot of times in the college search, location can be a big part of where a student looks and what ends up on their list. And so location for this student, it seemed this group of students seemed like either they wanted to be close to home in driving distance or they wanted to not be close to home. So the proximity for them was really, do I want to be close to home where I grew up, or do I want to get the heck away from my parents? And I believe that's true for most students, so I didn't really have any takeaways there. Also didn't really have a lot of takeaways from the for-profit school question. Talking about information search, though, they asked students where they went to get information during their college search. And yes, they said college websites, thank God. So they do go to homepages, but most of the students were talking about College Prowler as a secondary place, and many of them very enthusiastically talking about College Prowler during the whole panel. So College Prowler, if it's not on your radar now, it should be. And they're also talking about reference guides like the Princeton Review book, where everything is one spot. They're looking for quick answers. And so here's my huge takeaway from this part of the discussion. What's listed on College Prowler and in the review books is valuable to the students because it is factual, synthesized information in one spot, and it's easy for them to compare other institutions that they're looking at all in one place. So it's not that they're saying College Prowler is the be-all, end-all source of correct information and that's what they're looking for. It's more that they want to find this information quickly and they want to be able to compare schools side by side. They don't want to be going to one college website, trying to dig for the student-faculty ratio, going to another website where it's not going to be in the same place. They want to go to these sites or to these guidebooks because everything is in one place. So why aren't we then looking at these other websites, looking at what the guidebooks are offering students and putting that information right out on the main part of our admissions homepage? Why isn't this something that's more standardized so that students are able to go from one institution to the next and find all that information right at the forefront, so they don't have to go to these third-party sites to get the information? There's another component of this, though, especially with College Prowler, which is the student peer review. And the students did find that the peer review was very valuable to them. They cited on the college websites being able to see all the good, and that's great. They want to see all the good things about the institution, but on these peer review sites, they could also see the bad, and that enabled for them to make an informed decision about what school to attend. They wanted to see both the good and the bad about it. Peer review should be something I think we consider. And while you might not want to put the bad on your website, what are ways that we can start incorporating more of a peer review into our admissions homepages? So things like comments or voting up and down for stories, things that students also think are important. There are ways for us to get more of that authentic peer-reviewed type content on our pages. So those were huge takeaways for me, and especially bringing that information that students are looking for that is provided in the view books and on sites like College Prowler to the front of the page as high level as possible, because clearly that is the kind of thing that they're looking for in order to compare other schools. So that was an awesome point. They were also asked about the quality of their program during their college search. So students pretty much agreed that they were making their lists based on name recognition, whether they had heard of the school or not. They were making their lists thinking a lot about long-term, whether they're going to be able to get a job in their field, and will this college provide me with the education, but also the reputation to get a job. And so students were asked, how are they assessing the quality of the program? If they've picked a major, how do they know that this is a school that will help them succeed in that field? The first comment was alumni, that they were searching out alumni. Maybe they had a connection in the field that they wanted to go into, and they would ask that person where they should go to study. So alumni of the universities can be huge advocates, and I think we really need to empower our alumni just as much as we need to empower our current students, because we know they're going to sites like College Prowler. They also cited ratemyprofessor.com to get a good idea about the classroom environment, whether the faculty member is delivering them a valuable education. So Rate My Professor is also on their radar. And of course, the U.S. News and World Reports came up. They're not just looking at college websites for this kind of quality verification. They're looking for a third-party verification of quality. So my takeaway here is empower your alumni and your current students. They are going to be your best advocates, and provide that third-party verification on your site when it's relevant. I'm not saying go out and put those U.S. News and Report badges on your site, but think about the accreditations that your program has. Think about those credible kinds of quality verification that you can give to students, and maybe then link off to those sites so students can compare other universities that are also accredited. That was a good takeaway for me. So next part that college lists and how they determined how many colleges they were going to apply to. So it looked to me like most of the students were falling in that 3 to 7. I'm looking at my numbers here. It looks like, that between 3 and 7 was that kind of middle range of number of applications that students had going out. None of the students only applied to one college. None of the students applied to 2 colleges. None of them applied to 10, but one did apply to more than 10. So the sweet spot was 6 college applications. That's where most of the students fell. And that's a lot. I applied to 2 schools. No students on that panel applied to 2 schools. So again, students referenced applying to big name schools and in thinking about why they wanted a school with name recognition was, again, because of the job prospects after graduating. So if you're recruiting or if you're marketing for an institution that doesn't have name recognition, do you have good job prospects for your students? Because in the end, that's what they care about. It's not necessarily the name recognition. It's what am I going to get afterwards? Am I going to get a job? And do I need name recognition to get a job in the field that I'm going after? Most of the students said that they did have 2 to 4 safety schools on their list. So when applying to 6 schools, about half of them they knew they were going to get into. They had at some level reached that this was going to be a good fit institution for me, and I'm going to apply and give myself that option of attending. Again, it was a mix between public and private. Only 2 of the students had clear first choices. Students weren't determining their final decision before applying, which sometimes in the admissions world, we like to think that happens more often than it actually does. So a lot of students are going into this application process, putting out 6 applications without a clear first choice school. And that's an interesting reminder to me as an admissions professional. So my takeaways from the application process were that many schools made a student's list simply because of recognition and reputation. This is not all due to rankings, but it was all due to the job prospects after college. So what makes your institution reputable? Who can vouch for your institution's reputation? And it comes back to thinking for the student, in terms of completing their education at your school. What are you going to do to help that student earn their degree, and how are they going to break into the field that they want to get into after they leave? These are things that they want to know up front, and sometimes we get so caught up in the early stages of the application and enrollment process that we forget how important the end goal is for the student. So that was my takeaway for the app process. The next part, which was really in terms of advertising of colleges, things that they liked were some direct mail, and when it was direct mail that they liked, they were really interested in variable print. So, for example, customizing a print piece that would have a student's name, maybe something else that's unique to them that would fit into this variable print piece. So every piece that was printed was unique to the student that it was printed to. That's something that really stood out. It won't, however, make up for a lack of financial aid for a student, which is one of the comments. So this isn't necessarily going to be a decision maker, but if you want a student to pay attention to your direct mail, you're going to need to do something that stands out. Another student referenced the University of Chicago, that they thought they had a really creative spin on their direct mailing, and they mailed out a map to that student and then showed them how they could turn that map into a hat or how to turn it into a flag. So something that was a little bit more out of the box, a little bit more creative. They did make a mention about bright colors. So if you're sending letters in a standard white envelope, and especially if you are sending a letter to a student coming from an institution that they've never heard of before, that letter is most likely going to end up in the mailbox or in the trash can, unless it was something a little bit bolder, maybe with the school colors, maybe showed a little bit more of the school's personality or why the letter was going to the student on the outside of that envelope. So a lot of students talked about just not opening letters or reading anything that was sent to them, which can be discouraging if you're in the business of creating this content. They really harped on shortening letters, shortening the kind of information. They want it to get right to the point. And again, they're going to open it if it's a college that they've heard of before. So if you're trying to break into a market area that your school doesn't have recognition, that name recognition, it's going to be more and more difficult to get a student to open up that letter. So you got to think creatively especially if you're trying to break into different markets. They do like the swag in the mail. So colleges that are sending out t-shirts, they're sending out lanyards, stickers, those kinds of things, they like it. It's free stuff. So do it, but do it with a purpose, I would imagine. So things that they didn't like. They did not like ads that didn't have an impact on them. So ads that were too targeted to a different group, that makes sense to me. If they knew the school, they would appreciate the creativity in advertising. But if they don't know the school, it's not going to be of interest to them. And that's, just like letters, that's going in the trash. So, looking specifically at online advertising, they might be likely to click on an advertisement if it's a school that they've heard of. If it's not a school they've heard of, forget about it. They're not clicking. They talked about things that weren't really relevant to them. I guess we talked about TV spots, and they related most of the TV spots that they saw were for-profit colleges. They don't remember seeing any of the colleges that they were applying to doing any ads on TV. They don't think that banner ads on websites or advertisements on YouTube, they don't think they're cool. That's not something, advertising, just like me and hopefully you, advertisements are usually things that are getting in the way of what I'm trying to do on the web. So they don't necessarily think it's cool, but if it was a school that they were looking at, they would probably click the link. They never heard of it, not going to click the link. There were a lot of mixed reviews on these TV commercials. In the end, the moderator was trying to pull out what they would like to see in a TV commercial, and they said being edgy, making them laugh, having kind of an emotional response would stick with them. Doing things that would be popular with students, so using student slang, or taking your own student personality and kind of making fun of that or exploiting that, they thought would be a kind of fun and unique, genuine approach to commercial advertising toward them. Biggest takeaway from that whole set of that marketing session was that you need to test your marketing with your student audience before you launch it. If you're going to do something that's funny or edgy, make sure that your market thinks it's going to be funny and edgy. You absolutely have to test. And the second takeaway was that students want to feel a connection. They want to feel like they're actually a person. They want to feel like they're a person that's being recruited. And so a lot of times you need to be different in your marketing to stand out, and you need to really personalize what you're doing to make that student feel like they're more than just a number, that they're more than just a database that's being funneled all of the same kind of information that everyone else is getting. So personalization in marketing kept coming back more and more. You spent a lot of time talking about photographs, and when it comes down to it, students can see through these generic photographs. They're going to make zero impact on the student. It's nice to have things that look pretty, but if you're actually trying to make an impact with a photograph, you're going to need to do more than just these kind of stock images that colleges are often producing. So students can tell when something's authentic. They like to see students making funny faces or having that kind of more candid shot. So even if you don't think it's the best shot of that student, if it's a real photograph, it's a real authentic moment, put it out there. No, everything doesn't have to be so perfect and pretty, because they can see through exactly what we're putting out there. The kind of pictures that they were looking for were pictures of facilities, especially living spaces and things to do off campus. They want to see what their life is going to be like. And I know this is especially important for students later on in the search process. They want to see exactly what their life is going to be like on this campus. They aren't so concerned with seeing diversity in pictures. Again, they can kind of see through that. If anyone can kind of stage diversity was the message, and they know that. But one student did mention that to their parents, it was a big deal to see diversity in photography, and that did give the parents a little bit more of a reassurance that there was a diversity at the campus. My takeaways for photography is that you need to be real. You need to save time for these students. So if you're offering them information, you can kind of save time by showing them things in a graphic way instead of writing two paragraphs about what your campus looks like. Can you capture that in an image? And then again, providing them facts with their photos. I think this could be a big time saver. So if you're going to do something that is very graphical, lay in some of those facts that students are also looking for at the same time. So if you're showing, one of those generic photographs of a student in a classroom, make sure that the student-faculty ratio is there with it. So add a little bit of value to your photos by providing facts with them. Talked a lot about actual physical letters that came in the mail. I know I mentioned this a little bit already, but things that made an impact on students were the complexity of the letters. So if the letter was fancy, they did kind of attribute that to a university's prestige that they might have. So if they have something that looks very fancy, well, they must be a very fancy place. And I thought that was pretty cute. They also noted Columbia College for, again, sending out swag. One student got a blank book that said, "Live what you love," and she really appreciated that from the college. They, again and again, were harping on personality of the college and personalization of the letters and things that they were getting. So personal notes, things that are handwritten, really, really valuable to students. One student got a letter from Doc Rivers because he went to Marquette, and even though that is, not necessarily a personal thing for the student, probably everyone got a letter from Doc Rivers, but it was a little something extra, and it was a talking point for that student. They talked about duplicate letters and kind of the quality of the information that was provided to them. Getting things in the mail multiple times, they felt like it made the college look sloppy. It made them feel like the school did not care about them, that they weren't being kept track of, again, that they were just another number in the system. One student asked if colleges did this on purpose. So if part of your marketing strategy is to send the same thing a few times just to make sure that the student does open it, you might not want to do that. This should not be a strategy of yours. Again, students can see through marketing gimmicks. They want you to be concise with their communications. They want you to get to the point. If you are writing a letter, make your point in the first 4 sentences. If the rest of your letter is just filled with stuff about how great your school is, they're not going to read it, and quite frankly, you should not waste your time and ink putting it together there. They talked about the quality of the writing being fine. There were a lot of people in the audience that kind of had concerns about how things should be written, and they don't seem to really care about that. They want you to get to the point. They want you to show kind of the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes of the kind of information that you're trying to provide them, and give them the option to find out more somewhere else. So if they really want to find out more and you want to provide them with more information, allow them to do that separately, but providing them with too much information is just going to be overload, and they're not going to read any of it. So my takeaways for letter writing, takeaways from letter writing are not everything's going to be read. So if it's something that's critical, you need to make sure that you're differentiating it from the other things that you are putting out in the mail. And the things that they will read are going to be their acceptance letter. I was surprised at how many students said, I only read acceptance letters. I didn't read anything else that came in the mail. Acceptance letter, financial aid. Yes, they will open things if there is swag, and they will look at view books. And oftentimes they rather look through a booklet than open a letter. So for your acceptance letters, for your financial aid letters, for any kind of swag that you might put out to students, and for your view books, make them count. That might be the only thing that a student is looking at. And make sure that you're getting to the point fast. That was another huge takeaway. You can get to the point fast by sending postcards. Students said that they would look at a postcard, especially if it was something that was handwritten. Again, that personality was important to the students. And anything that's going to save them time, providing a checklist, putting in bullet points, bolding statements. So if you do need to write the whole letter, if it's all really important information, make sure that you're showing students exactly where the important information is in the letter. If they're only going to read the first 4 sentences and they don't get to the important part on the bottom, you need to highlight that important part on the bottom somehow to them. So those are really important things to think about as you're writing letters. I know we all still are, which can come to a big surprise to other industries. We do still work a lot with paper mail and paper letters. Talking a little bit quickly about phone calls and text messaging, the students felt like the kind of cold calls that were coming into them, colleges that were calling to recruit students. Some students were getting 3 to 5 phone calls a day from colleges. Way too invasive. It crept right into their own sense of privacy, and they were not having it whatsoever. So those phone calls, bad. But they did have a preference when communicating with their admissions counselor that it would be over phone or over email. So after that personal connection's made, when you're adding value to a conversation over the phone, they are preferring the phone at that point. Text messaging, a lot of students didn't interact over text message with their colleges, but a lot of them were very open to it. And the things that they would want to see over text messages would be event reminders and kind of deadline reminders, those kinds of things, to keep them on task. And they said that they would read a text message before they would read their email. So I think we've talked about this before on Admissions Live. Text messaging is a really accessible way to provide communication to students, and we just need to kind of be really tactful in the way that we're delivering it to them. Just want to quickly check out our Admissions Live hashtag. If you do have any questions, please feel free to send them my way. And it looks like you're all kind of chatting to yourselves, which is what I absolutely love. So keep it going. Thanks to you that are live tweeting the session right now. Talking about social media, this is right in my wheelhouse, what I love to talk about in admissions. And it started off not well on the panel. Students are annoyed and irritated at the amount of social media that's pushed their way by colleges and universities. Social media was the last place that students wanted to see their colleges. They said that they're trying to escape their schoolwork when they go into social media, and they're not looking for their colleges to interact with them. So, and again, this is part of the search process. They also said colleges that are trying to recruit over social media or even chat platforms and those kinds of things, that text is a different kind of an experience than an actual live conversation. And so that Facebook chat is not a place that schools should be. They said that Facebook is not a professional place, and so they wouldn't expect a professional institution to have a presence there. That the chat was too invasive, and that phone calls with an admissions counselor would be better. Later in the social media discussion, students said it depends on how you use the social media. And talking about the incoming class groups on Facebook, they absolutely love those as a way to meet people, to feel closer with the school, to find roommates, to find classes and classmates. And some people were more into that than others, but overall it was deemed a good thing to have. The other social media that was mentioned, the students said admitted to not reading blogs, which we've heard over and over again. They admitted to using Tumblr, and more of them using Twitter, using Pinterest and Instagram. But again, these are all things that they were just asked whether they were using or not. And so I'm taking all of that with kind of a grain of salt. They said that they would be willing to follow institutions if they were on Instagram or Tumblr. Some of the girls really liked Pinterest and were wondering why colleges weren't using that. But again, I think we need to think about our goals here. And my big takeaway for social media is that students do not want their time wasted. Their time is important to them. They want their interactions with their colleges to help them and to save them time. So if you can do something over social media that will help a student and save them time, I think you're on the right track. And it's all about goals before tools. Anytime you're using a social media tool, make sure you're using it to directly impact a goal that you have. So my favorite phrase is that you need to use social media tools, not to be a social media tool. And the students get that. They see right through our kind of sneaky ways to infiltrate social media because we know that they're there. So it's time to start thinking about ways that we can actually help students and leverage these platforms to save them time and help them through the process. Students talked about video, and they're very into video as long as it's short and it saves them time. So you're going to keep hearing these things ringing true on almost all the kind of marketing efforts that we're going out. Things need to be shorter. If they can quickly read about an event, rather than watching your 6-minute video about an event, they rather read about it. What saves them time? What is more valuable? So make sure that your videos are short, they're real, they're authentic videos. They want to see videos of facilities, and they are viewing the videos on the college websites. They're not going to YouTube and searching for them. So while I think it's smart to put your videos up on YouTube and make them shareable, you have to remember that you can't just put them up on your YouTube channel and leave them there, that you have to put them back on your college website also. QR codes got trashed. And if you followed any of the Stamats Sim hashtag, you would have heard that the QR codes got trashed during this panel. The students didn't know what the QR code was. They said they didn't have a smartphone. But I listened really intently, and there were some rumblings on the panel where some students said that they did use them, and some thought that they were cool. So just like any other kind of platform, you kind of have to use it when it's smart, of course, but think about how a QR code might save a student time and might help them out. And for that demographic of students that does have a smartphone, does think that it's cool, maybe it's going to appeal to that audience. On the note of smartphones, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about them. It seemed to me after the panel kind of rolled out that more of the students actually did have smartphones than not. A lot of them were talking about using their iPhone. One student even said that he checked his admission decision on his iPhone, took a screenshot of it, and posted it to Facebook. So there was all extremes there on the panel, from the student that didn't have one to one that was actually really engaged with it through their decision process. Next section of the And I'm now realizing that you might have lost my sound when those slides were going up. So I apologize for that, if that's happening. Yeah, I think that is happening. All right, so I won't do that anymore. Campus visits. What students were talking about during campus visits, that when they were on campus, there was a whole lot of influence. And this is something that we know. We know the campus visit is a huge part of the decision-making process. One thing that was interesting to me is that about half of the students knew who their admissions counselor was, and those that did had a really great relationship with their admissions counselor. They were giving shout outs and thank yous to their admissions counselor. So staffs that can really spend the time to sit down and influence a student all the way through their search and kind of stick with that student and advocate for them. That was a huge impact on the student's decision to apply, and I would say likely for their decision to enroll too. So it's an important influence that they have coming out of the admissions office, but as we know, we also have those student tour guides and the students' own peers that attend our institution. So our current students have an even bigger influence, especially during a campus visit. So we know that the campus visit is a big deciding factor. Again, the students want this to be a personal experience for them. They don't want to feel like they're just part of a massive group that's being shuffled around our campus as another part of an everyday tour that's going on. They want to feel like it's personal for them. They want well-informed and enthusiastic tour guides. Of course, we know a great tour guide can make all the difference. One student said that they want to see good-looking people. That made me smile. And students that were offered an overnight saw the value of being able to meet people and see what that kind of everyday life is for a student, what they'd be doing outside of class. So if you're not able to offer an overnight to a student, I think this is where you might be able to leverage some of your other content that you have to show students what those things are like outside the classroom. That's something that I really like doing with video. Takeaways for campus visits. Students like to be invited to events that are happening on campus. So if you have a concert going on, if there's some kind of sports game, think about letting the student interact as if they were a current student on your campus. It's going to make them feel like they're a part of your community while they're there. Second takeaway, show students the places that they're going to be spending a lot of their time. So it's nice to give them a quick tour, but then you might want to also point out this is the quad where a lot of students hang out, this is the dining hall where most students eat, those kinds of things. They're going to want to see the places that they're going to be actually living. You also want to show them things that are unique only to your campus, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And when students are on campus, they are going to remember the stories that are told, not necessarily those quick facts that are delivered. They can always look up the facts later, but the stories that you tell, the stories that your student tour guides tell are the things that are going to stick. So make sure that you have those anecdotal stories to share with students, especially if you're a representative that didn't attend the institution. You might have to talk with colleagues about anecdotal things, but those really do stick with students after they leave campus. One other thing about being on campus that I'll talk about now is the orientation program. About half of the students had already gone through their orientation program before this panel, and it made students really excited to go. It confirmed that they wanted to go to that college, and at first I was thinking, wow, having that early orientation can be a huge help for summer melt, but later, a student said that they were overwhelmed with all the information so early and that they probably won't remember it when they came to campus. So I think my takeaway for orientation is that you have to orient students throughout the entire summer. That it's not just orientation at the beginning of summer, maybe not just before classes, but students would rather be slowly led into this transition of coming to college their whole summertime. So one student said providing them with a checklist of things that they should be doing throughout the summer would be very helpful to them. I think that's another great takeaway. Last thing, I'm just going to flash my slide and not talk. Last item is college decisions. What was influential to them? And I'm going to quickly wrap through this. So much for taking a half hour. I'm taking a full hour to deliver all of this content back to you. But who was influential? It was their parents, their siblings, their friends. It was also their college and counselor or guidance counselor in the high school. As far as resources on the web, College Prowler came up again and again. A lot of students, again, visited the site enthusiastically. They really liked the grading system. It helped them understand things easier. They liked that it was peer-reviewed, and it was important for them to know the good and the bad. Students were also using Naviance, again, for those kind of quick facts that they are looking for that's hard to find on our own institution's websites. They were using U.S. News News and World Report. They were looking at rankings there. They're looking at descriptions. They're, again, looking at quick facts like student-faculty ratios. 4 of the students said that the rankings were very important to them. Most of them said that they were somewhat important to them, and only 1 student said that rankings were completely unimportant to them. So again, when a student graduates, they want to know that they're going to have a good job, that their school is recognized, and that they have that sense of job security that comes with a school with a good reputation, and for them, a high ranking. So that is a little bit of a reiteration, but it was part, again, of their decision-making process. They were thinking about the value of the school, and things that they wanted to know were internship opportunities, the percent of students that got jobs, and not just got jobs, but got jobs in their field. They want to know the kind of jobs that the students were getting, and the average number of years it takes a student to graduate from the institution. Those are all things that factored into the value of the education at that school. But when push came to shove, the final college decision was being made on cost. Almost every single student made their college decision this year, on this panel anyway, based on cost. They went with the cheapest option available to them, and you can't blame them. So that is what I have for you. My biggest takeaway from this whole panel was that if you can make your communications to students and provide them with value that makes their life easier, they're actually going to use the communication tools that you put out for them. So make things easier for them, save them time. We're asking students to give us a lot of their time in a lot of ways. Read this letter from us, review through this view book, come interact with us on social media. We're asking them to do so many things that take up their time. They're not going to do it. But if we can communicate with them and at the same time save them time through their college process, we might be able to interact with them a little bit more. So that was my huge takeaway. I'm going to be signing off just short of the 8 o'clock hour. Next week, I hope you join me. We're going to be bringing Ben Kesselman on the show, who is continuing research at Harvard on summer melt and an intervention program that he's been working on in the past couple of years. So I hope you join me next Tuesday, 7 p.m., same place, higheredlive.com. Thanks, guys.